Martha, and I would like to talk to you about smallpox. My research question is, was smallpox disease used as a weapon towards the Native Americans to intentionally give new settlers their land? My thesis statement: smallpox was inadvertently exposed to the fragile immune systems of the indigenous people by the European settlers. So we're going to start here in 1492, where Christopher Columbus made landfall in the Bahama area. When he first made landfall, he went back to the old world to tell everybody what he found: treasures, land. And so it got everyone excited who was interested in traveling the world to discover new land. So this brought on the Columbian Exchange. So Columbian Exchange here we have is a swap between the eastern and western hemispheres. It's the old and new world, switching between food, plants, cultures, animals, and germs, diseases. And smallpox is one of them here. So before anyone came to try to conquer the Indians, their land, the population here was in the million, like 600 million. And we have here in Mexico City, which was the first known recorded smallpox outbreak. Their population in 1520 was 22 million. And it's recorded here 8 million deaths alone from smallpox. Now, Hernan Cortez landed on the Aztec land, Mexico City. He wanted what they had. He wanted their land, their riches, the technology that they had. It was a beautiful city in the Aztec Empire. But the tribes, they didn't want nothing to do with Hernan Cortez. They didn't want to convert into Christianity. They just wanted them to leave. They didn't want them to invade their land. So eventually what happened was the Battle of Tenochtitlan. The Battle of Tenochtitlan was in 1521, and this is when Hernan Cortez had the ability to fight the Indians who were already suffering from smallpox. There wasn't as many to help with the battle, and they ended up conquering the land. Now we have here a very known source. It's the 12th book from the Florentine Codex, and it was written by Fray Bernardino de Sahagin. He worked with the tribes during that time. It talked about pretty much like a journal, how they lived, what they ate, the culture, and it's between the native tongue, the tribe language, and Spaniard. So here we have, and I'll show you, one of the pictures here was describing the smallpox disease, how it affected the people. They were laying in their beds. They couldn't even turn over. They couldn't move. Most of them who had smallpox died of hunger because nobody was there to feed them. And nobody was there to care for them. Either they were all sick themselves or they didn't want to get sick. So it explained pretty much the life of the Aztecs. And here is an up-close picture of the smallpox. So I had like the red bumps on the skin. They're just laying in bed. Next, we're going to move on to another wartime, which had another smallpox outbreak. This was in 1528 by the Incas. Now, the Inca Empire, his name was Huayna Capac. He died of smallpox himself. Now, he had 2 sons, and they were doing their own little Civil War battle. And during this time of the Civil War battle, we have Francisco Pizarro. He wanted to conquer their land. So he took advantage of the smallpox. With only less than 200 men, he conquered the land. And let's see. This was within 3 years' time, of course, but it was only 200 men that he had on his boat that wiped out the Inca town, and he overcame it. But again, it was mainly smallpox was already hurting the people, so they had an upper hand. Next, we're going to move on here to the French and Indian War. This happened between 1754 and 1763. Supposedly, this is the first biological warfare, and it was between the French and British. They were fighting for territory, fighting for land. Here we have the blue, which is the French, the yellow, which is the Spaniards, and the orange, which is British. After the war, it ends up the Spanish, received more territory, and the British gained more land, leaving only this little blue here for the French. Unfortunately, the Indians were fighting with the French, and the British were cutting off their resources. So, they didn't have an opportunity there to win. And that is also another hard hit during that time with the smallpox. Again, a hard hit. People, tribes were dying from that as well. And after this French and Indian War happened, we're going to move on to the Pontiac War. The Pontiac War was when the tribe master Pontiac himself from the Ottawa tribe, he joined local tribes together from Lake Superior to Lower Mississippi to try to run off the British from their lands that France originally was conquered, because they just want to push them out. They wanted their land back. Here we have pictures of where we have the British giving a blanket to the Indians. So, like I said, it's the first biological warfare. And the fact that if it's true or not, some say it is, some say it isn't. Some say they used the smallpox to their advantage to win the war. This here is an original letter between two colonels. We have Jeffrey Amherst, which is shown here in this picture, writing a letter to Mr. Bouquet. Now I'm going to read to you what they were writing to each other in the letters. So this is General Amherst. Could it not be contrived to send the smallpox among those disaffected tribes of Indians? We must on this occasion use every strategy in our power to reduce them. And then, so we have Mr. Bouquet writing back, you would do well to try to inoculate the Indians by means of blankets, as well as to try every other method that can serve to expedite this execrable race. And then in the last letter between the two, I will try to inoculate the Indians by means of blankets that may fall in their hands, taking care, however, not to get the disease myself. So, and then it turns out, reading this, researching it, that it really did happen. There was a blanket given to one of the Indians, and there was already a smallpox outbreak, and they don't know if it was because of the blanket. It was already happening in the French and Indian War. But there was another outbreak at that time that hurt a lot of Indians. So when Jeffrey Amherst got called back to the old world, he got in trouble for his actions, for saying he wanted to do that, and they ended up demoting him. But then he rised again elsewhere. But anyways, that's another part in time where smallpox happened, whether it was intentional or unintentional. I don't really think it, even if they tried to do it, I think it actually was just the natural cause of smallpox spreading, because the tribes were so close together, fighting. So that's what happened throughout the time, and how the Indians were removed from their land was mostly by death. And then, of course, like I said, there's prior to Christopher Columbus, there was like 60 million Indians. A century later, 6 million Indians. 90% died from disease alone. So it wasn't just like a heartbreaking wars or kicking the Indians out of their land. It was disease that came from the old world to the new world that killed them because of their immune system. They just didn't have anything to fight